Let me say that these dialogues have, for the better part of this decade, focused on that part of cinema devoted to narrative or dramatic filmmaking. And we've had evenings with actors, directors, cinematographers, and I would say really especially with those performers that we identify with the cutting edge of narrative filmmaking. In describing tonight's guest, Molly Haskell spoke of a creative artist who not only did a sizable number of important projects, but more importantly, did the projects that she herself wanted to see made. The same, I think, can be said about Molly Haskell. She began in the 1960s, working in New York for the French Film Office, at that point where the French New Wave needed a promoter and a writer and a translator. She eventually wrote the landmark book From Reverence to Rape on Women in Cinema, from 1973 and republished in 1987, and did sizable stints as the film reviewer for Vogue magazine, The Village Voice, New York Magazine, New York Observer, and more recently for On the Issues. Her most recent book, Holding My Own in No Man's Land, contains her last 2 decades worth of writing. I'm pleased to say it's in the Walker Bookstore as well. Our other guest tonight needs no introduction here in the Twin Cities, nor in Cloquet, Minnesota, nor would I say any place in the world that motion pictures are watched and cherished. She's an internationally recognized star, but she's really a unique star. She's someone who never allowed that celebrityhood to mar her personal life nor her extraordinary work as a film professional. It gives me a great deal of pleasure to welcome here to the Walker to conduct a dialogue on her 2 decades on screen and to interview her, Molly Haskell and Jessica Lange.
Some water. The homecoming queen. Well, you hardly ever do these things, and I think obviously your destiny is to come to the Walker Art Center because you're from Minnesota and now you're back in Minnesota, so you can go home again. Is that the moral?
Well, it's been easy for me. I don't know.
Where you were born, not here. You grew up where in Minnesota?
In northern Minnesota.
Uh-huh. Was it country or small town?
Small town.
Small town. We met 20 years ago. I didn't know if she would remember, but she did, at a little dinner party in New York, and she came in and she had just shot King Kong, and it hadn't been released yet, and she was with her then, was he husband or beau?
Beau.
Always
They've
beau.
always
They've
been
always been
beaux.
Mikhail Baryshnikov. And she was the loveliest thing I've ever seen, and she hasn't changed, only she's gotten more interesting, I think. That was, what was that, about 70?
It had to be 76.
76.
Wasn't it?
And we'll start back. You know, one of the things about your being, I mean, for a well-known person, relatively unknown, precisely because you haven't done things like this, and nobody really knows that much, or the gossip columnists haven't gotten hold of you as much as they might have. So when did you want to be an actress, or was it dancing, or what started you off?
Actually, I started off at the University of Minnesota in the art department, studying painting.
Fine arts,
and photography, and ended up with a group of photographers from here, and we traveled around Europe, and ended up coming back to New York to live. This is a long story. In New York, I got involved with a modern dancer. She had just left the Merce Cunningham Company, was starting a modern dance company of her own and theater company in downtown, way downtown, before it was really Soho. Yeah. And from there, we got interested in mime and discovered that Etienne Ducroux, who was like the old master, was actually still alive and teaching in Paris. So I left for Paris to study with him and stayed there for 2 years, and then decided there wasn't really that much I could do with it. So Besides that, he actually discouraged you from performing. So he would fly into these fits of rage if he found out that you actually had...
that was too vulgar to actually perform.
Yes, it was. It was too pedestrian. So I decided to go back to New York, and the only kind of logical step from mime seemed to be acting. So I went back to New York to study acting. And
did you go to the actor studio then?
when I first got back, I studied with Herbert Berghoff.
Oh, yeah.
And then from there, with a couple other acting teachers, with Warren Robertson and Mira Rostova, and then the Actors Studio.
And you did stage work first?
Well, actually, I didn't do any stage work. I did a little bit of stage work in Paris before I came back to study in New York, but my very, I hate to admit it, my very first audition that I ever went on was for King Kong.
Really? It's amazing. Did your agent get it? How did
and
that
I
happen?
got the job, which was like so...
And you had no idea what you were getting in for, did you?
No.
Oh, well, that was amazing. What happened with that? Did people resent it because it was a remake of a film they loved, or what do you think?
I have no idea. I was so completely naive
you didn't
and
know, yeah.
I'm clueless as to what the situation really was. All I know is that it was a very long shooting schedule. I think we shot for something like 9 months.
And grueling, I'm sure.
And it was incredible. I remember Chuck Grodin saying to me at some point, you know, this isn't what movies are really like. But I didn't know because it was the very first thing I had done.
They might have all been like that as far as you were concerned.
They could have all been that tedious. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I have no idea.
Well, it's a much better. You probably haven't even seen it again, or ever, maybe. But it's a much better film than its reputation would allow. Certainly, you're better. I don't know if the film is, because it was really it was one of those things that's not repeatable. Did you ever see the original? I mean,
yes.
It's just and something about the black and white. But to play a screaming victim for 2 hours.
Well, you had to be young and naive to do it.
You do, that's right.
It has to be your first film,
otherwise you wouldn't do it. So what came after that?
Then I did that little goofy part in Fosse's film.
All That Jazz.
All That Jazz.
Yeah. And then Postman Always Rings Twice?
And then Postman.
Well, we're going to show that in a second. And that was Bob Rafelson. How did you get that? Had Rafelson seen you in King Kong? Or by that time you were known. You were sort of making magazine covers and things like that.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, I guess he had. That was the only thing I'd done up till then.
But that was a really challenging part. I mean, the original Postman Always Rings Twice with Lana Turner and John Garfield, which some of you may have seen, was from a James Cain novel, very steamy, but in the earlier version, they couldn't do anything. All Lana Turner could do was wear a bathing suit, so that even though they were having this wild affair, it didn't come through. There was no electricity. But yours, I think this is one of the... Well, I don't want to get into it too much. We'll talk about it afterwards. But one of the more erotic scenes, not only for that time, but in the last 20 years. All right. So can we show that now?
Well, that's a hell of a way to start.
We pack it a wallop up front. Well, what's fantastic about that scene, I think, is that this, of course, is she's married to this old Greek owner of the gas station and poverty-stricken and just dying to get out of this place. And Jack Nicholson. What makes it fantastic is it goes from being what you think is going to be the standard rape scene, and then when she turns and becomes involved. I mean, I think what everybody... This scene was wildly discussed and talked about and responded to at the time, so that's one reason we're showing it first. It was really a conversation piece. And but that moment when she turns, because there were a lot of movies where women were getting raped or abused or otherwise violated and victimized, and here it's that turning of the thing, and when she knocks that luscious looking bread off the table. What was it like to do that? Did you do that early on in the film, and did you discuss it beforehand? How did it evolve?
Well, we didn't discuss it very much beforehand. It was, you know, the thing about James Cain was that so much, I mean, the sexuality was all tied up in violence for him. I mean, it was really dark. I mean, that's what I enjoyed about. I mean, it was kind of, you know,
So lower middle class.
Death, sex, and opera was
And-
like his
yeah.
main thing, I think. But with this piece, it was interesting because no matter what scene we were doing, I mean, you know, obviously this scene, but then every other scene, whether it was, you know, Jack pumping gas or you know, me working, you know, as the waitress pouring coffee or murdering the old Greek or whatever it was. I mean, Jack would always say right before the take, he'd say, "Remember, honey, this is all about sex." And it's true. I mean,
Yeah.
that is the essence of James Cain, and
That's
it certainly
right.
is the essence of the relationship. You know,
Yeah.
and I mean, it is what destroys these two people in the end. But
Well, and it's
Yeah.
a hungry woman. How often do you see that on the screen? A woman passionate,
yeah,
a woman with an appetite.
Yeah.
It's just fantastic. And of course, James Cain was done earlier, in the earlier Postman Always Rings Twice and Double Indemnity, but they never really could do it full throttle.
no, I think
until
they had
this.
too many censorship.
Yeah. And there are not that many American directors who could do it well, I think. I mean, Americans are skittish.
Rafelson was very, I mean, he really did like these kind of scenes.
Yeah.
But he always would do like my part, which I thought was odd. He'd
You
say,
mean what
"Now
he
let
would
me
do?"
show you
Uh-huh.
how this," and then he'd say, "Come on, Jack, get on top of me now."
Well, I think this is one of the things when we talk about male versus female, you really can't divide it up that way in movies, because one of the reasons men like to direct women is because they can identify with the women. They play both parts,
Yeah.
don't they? Yeah.
No, I mean, I loved working with Rafelson on this because he was fearless.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, he is not a cautious man, as you know. And
it's never, you don't, even though it's all about sex, you don't feel like there's anything gratuitous in it, the way you did when suddenly the screen opened up and you could do sex, so then everybody did it in a kind of
Yeah.
automatic way.
no, it was absolutely, I mean, inherent to this.
Yeah. Organic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is
But
what
I mean,
this
that was
story is about.
that was an amazing thing for you to do still. You were young and not far from the starting gate.
I know. That's probably why I did that one, too. It was my second time out.
Well, you're known for I think fearless is a word that would describe a lot of your performances. So you showed, I mean, fearlessness even to do King Kong. That was
Yeah.
not every
Fearless
starting
or
out
stupid.
actress.
Not sure.
Now, did you have any sense of your career at this point, or were you just looking at scripts and?
No, because there had been actually a period of time after King Kong that I didn't work.
Why was that?
Well, because I wasn't offered anything.
Yeah.
So, you know, when Rafelson started calling me about doing this, I mean, it was like a godsend. I couldn't believe it. Here was a great part, I mean, especially for, you know, somebody who hadn't done that much work, a chance to work with Jack, and a chance to do a film by Bob Rafelson. I mean, Five Easy Pieces is still one of my favorite movies, you know, so.
A great director. Well, and obviously he saw something in you. I mean, people thought of the role in King Kong as bimbo, so they typecast you as bimbo, but he saw that
Yeah.
you were a lot more than that.
Yeah. No, it was great. It was really, it was a great opportunity, and I always think, you know, this was actually the beginning. This
Yeah,
film
it was,
really the beginning for me.
Yeah, and Nicholson was good, obviously. He was uninhibited, right? I mean, had a way
He
of...
was the great, I mean, I couldn't have asked to work with an actor at that point that would have been more generous and sweeter than Jack was.
It's so funny, because he has this sort of, he always plays these diabolical parts, and yet he's a really completely generous actor.
He was so generous.
Yeah.
I mean, always watching to make sure that what I was doing and he had such an uncanny sense of the camera.
Really?
And he would always say to me stuff like, he'd see me do a take, even if he wasn't in the, you know, in the scene with me or whatever, and he'd say, you know, honey, that camera's over, you know. And he'd always like somehow try to give me the information that I didn't, because I was...
Well, it makes it okay to do those things, too. If somebody like that says, look, go on, do it.
Yeah.
Expose yourself.
Yeah, he was great.
So then 82 was the big year, or was it 83? 82, Frances and Tootsie.
Yeah.
You couldn't get two more different. Well, Frances, how did that come about?
Well, Graham Clifford was editing Postman. He was the editor. And he had gotten a hold of this script of Frances and had got them to hire him as a director. He had never directed anything before, but he was so passionate about it. And he brought it to me and asked me if it would be something that I would be interested in, which was so...
Was this a script then? Or
This was a script.
Was it based on the... I read the biography
Well,
at the
it
time.
wasn't... It was based on a lot of different biographical information, not necessarily on the book. But it was interesting because when I was doing acting classes in New York, I had picked up that book. My acting teacher from years and years before had said, if you ever play a part, this is the part you should play. And he gave me this book, Will There Really Be a Morning? Yeah. And I read it, and I actually excerpt scenes from it and put together, and we did some of these scenes in the acting class, and in scene study class. So, and out of the blue...
Which ones, just out of curiosity?
The ones between the mother, which was really what the relationship... But it was interesting then.
So Clifford sent you a finished script, and you liked the script?
I loved it.
Yeah.
I mean, I just loved everything about Frances Farmer. So I think they could have sent me a, a blueprint, and I would have said yes. And it was so interesting because he was still editing Postman, and he was in pre-production on Frances, and I just assumed that the part was mine. And he took me to meet Mel Brooks, whose company was producing the film. Yeah. And I just assumed that it was already my
done deal.
That it was my part. And I remember going in to meet Mel Brooks and talking to him, and later he wrote me a note saying he was going to give me the part because I was so sure of myself that he thought it had a quality of Frances to it.
You didn't know you were auditioning, right?
I had no idea.
Once again, fearless or dumb, we're not sure
Yeah,
which.
we're not sure.
Well, of course, Frances Farmer was this doomed star, but a thinker, an intelligence. And in the beginning, she gives this paper in this high school paper for which she wins a prize, and after which she's accused of being communist and radical and left-wing. She goes to New York, becomes involved with the group theater with Clifford Odets. It's an incredibly tumultuous life, and on drugs, drink, institutionalized, lobotomy. It's a harrowing story, and there are so many. Looking through it to try to figure out it's impossible to get clips because there's so many big scenes in it, and there's so many different moods. The scenes with, well, I don't want to get into it too much. What we're going to show, you don't know which clips we're going to do. Well, we'll surprise you. Okay. We'll do Frances now.
I haven't seen any of these for a long time.
That's a fantastic scene. And there's a quality there that you don't have anywhere else in the film, this kind of mischievous, diabolical wit. I mean, it's very darkly funny. And you pay for it. I mean, for taunting this guy. And I think, and Kim Stanley, of course, is the mother.
Yes, isn't she great?
But that little sister, I mean, and what's also fascinating is how your character just keeps, I mean, the mother in this case has had her institutionalized. The mother has betrayed her, sold her down the river, and yet you don't know that and you don't want to believe it. You just keep going back home thinking, how can your mother be bad? It's your mother.
Yeah, that was her biggest mistake, is she kept going back, and every time she'd go back, her mother would send her back again to the institution.
And I mean, and then you have these. I mean, there's a rage. You have that rage always. Sometimes it comes out during the film more than other times, except in the scenes with Sam Shepard. It's almost like this one where you're sitting, I think you've gone to Hollywood, and he comes out he plays, what is he, a journalist or a politician? Or?
Well, he was actually based on a real character.
Really?
Kind of a local politico in Seattle.
Yeah.
Who kind of tracked her.
Followed her.
Yes,
and
kept track of her and was, more or less, I think.
Yeah. And if she'd married him, she would have settled down and been a political activist in Seattle. But there's a scene where you're on a deck or something in California, and he's saying, well, you just have to pick your battles, Frances. And that's the problem. She doesn't know when.
Yeah. No, they're all battles for Frances.
Everything, every moment is a battle. And that's what happens here. She turns this guy into an enemy. I mean, he's a horrible, oily person, but
she could have slid out of that situation really easily.
Yeah, but she couldn't do it. Was that exhausting, that film, to do?
It was, but it was so exciting because it was kind of the biggest dramatic part that I could imagine doing, and it was a character that I really loved. But Graham Clifford, the director, being an editor, shot every possible foot of film that could conceivably, I mean,
he was insecure. It was his first time out.
It was his first time out, and he wanted himself covered well in the editing room. And I remember when we would be on location, we were on location up in Seattle, and we were shooting 6-day weeks, and we were shooting like 14, 16-hour days. And I mean, everybody was exhausted after the first.
Takes on each one.
And a lot of takes. And after the first week of shooting, he called me on a Sunday morning, and he said, I can't get the crew, but I can get the camera. And I thought maybe we could just go out and shoot for a couple hours this afternoon. You know that scene where you climb that tree? But yeah, he was
being an obliging person, not like Frances Farmer.
I actually said no. No, I said we have to draw the line somewhere.
Well, that's the trouble with the film. If there is one, it's so episodic.
Yes.
You don't feel an overall trajectory of it.
Yeah.
But there's some fantastic individual scenes. There's one that I love where it's by this time you've gotten to be drinking and you're a little bit on the skids, and you've got all of and also I love when you first get to Hollywood, and it's a picture that's in the program here with you, that beautiful white net dress, and saying that you don't want glamour, and this is something we'll talk about too. How do you feel about that? But then you're late on the set, and you come in, and I think you're a little drunk, and you go. They send you in to make. Everybody's been held up for 4 hours, and you go in to get made up, and there's a woman doing your hair, and she's just furious at you, and she starts pulling at your hair and said, she's just abusing you and abusing you. You're losing your hair, and finally you just get up and hit her and walk out. And I just love that, because the hairdressers are always doing that. They're always saying, "What are you doing with gray hair? What are you doing with losing your hair?" But it's a very unusual scene where she just hauls off and socks this woman. So I mean, you're really willing to do things that are abrasive, aggressive, that are teetering on the edge of unlikability. Mm-hmm. And you knew it, didn't you? I mean,
but I mean,
I love that.
With Frances, I thought there was something so noble about her character that I guess in some way all that abrasiveness and her harshness and I mean really her craziness in dealing with these situations. I mean, I thought they were all grounded in absolute truth.
Yeah.
And that was the thing that I felt was her saving grace. This was a woman who just couldn't let anything slide by.
Yeah, she was completely impolitic.
Yeah.
Most people on this earth are political or diplomatic at one time or another, because their self-interest is at stake.
Yes.
She didn't have any of that.
No, she had no survival instincts when it came to that whatsoever.
And no armor.
No.
And that's the quality you have too, I think, or that you can show, is this unguarded, unarmored. I mean, you're not protecting yourself, and that is, I think, fantastic. It's it's unsettling, because you're so close to the skin, and the audience is with you. I mean, they don't know what's going to happen. It's scary. It's a scary. Yeah. And you were nominated for an Academy Award. Who won that year? I think you should have won.
Thank you,
remember?
Molly. I do, of course I remember. I remember every year I do.
You know all the You don't care about those things, right?
No, that year actually Meryl Streep won.
Oh, that figures.
It does figure.
Nothing? No? For what? For Sophie's Choice. Well, that was a heavy year.
Yeah.
It seems unfair. Well, it does, because there have been not that many great roles for actresses.
I
through
know,
the
and you had
years.
two great
ones,
roles.
right, yeah, up against each other. And at the other extreme was Tootsie, which
Yes.
I just have such a soft spot for, and it's got so many great scenes. The story, of course, and Dustin Hoffman playing a desperate New York actor who finally dons women's clothes in order to get a role and gets the role on the soap opera. And the very first scene, where does it? You're on a set, and what happens on the set of the soap opera, and you end up on the floor looking at each other. It's just
Yeah, I can't remember.
the chemistry. Several scenes that I love, but one I think he's come to as Dorothy, and they have this lovely little friendship between Dustin Hoffman's kind of hard-boiled spin, but Dustin Hoffman, of course, finds out he's a better person as a woman than he was as a man, and as Dorothy, he becomes this firebrand feminist on behalf of womankind, and he's of course in love with what's your character's name? Julie. And Julie doesn't know who he is, and he's over visiting her, and you've got the little baby, and you're always making the wrong, and this is true, actually there is a link between Francis and Julie in that they always
make the wrong decision.
People. They make the wrong decisions, and Julie says, I see a man, and I see that the minute I see that he's a bastard, that's when I make my move, And then you have it, and maybe in the same scene, but you say, I don't know why do men always have to, do this song and dance. I wish just one time a man would come up to me, instead of saying you're beautiful, you're this, I want to go to bed with you, just once. So of course, later on at a cocktail party, Dustin Hoffman arrives not as Dorothy, but as the male actor that he is. And Julie's out on the porch, and he walks out overlooking New York and says, I want to go to bed with you. And of course, she throws a drink in his face. But this is later in the film when they'd gone to the farm where Charles Durning is your wonderful father.
Yeah.
And Dorothy has been invited out for the weekend, and Charles Durning has just made a pass at Dorothy. And now Dorothy goes up to go to bed with Julie. So we'll show that. Oh, girl talk.
Dustin was so great.
Was it wonderful to film?
Well, it was, it was interesting because I had just finished doing Francis, and they sent me the script. Sidney Pollack, the director, sent me the script, and I kept saying, I don't think so. I don't think I want to do this.
Why?
It seems so kind of lightweight after doing Francis, and actually Kim Stanley said to me, do a comedy next. So then I looked at it again, and actually it's the only time a director's had to kind of really pursue me to do a part, and Sidney kept coming after me.
You'd never done comedy?
No, I'd never done comedy.
Didn't think you could do it?
I didn't think it was very funny.
Did the script not seem that funny?
Well, when I first saw the script, it was before Elaine May came in and did her rewrite and everything, so it got considerably better. I mean, there were so many different versions of the script, and it was something Dustin had been working on for a long time. And
Did he ever work on anything for a short time?
I don't think so.
Was he impossible? Well, go finish what you were going to say.
No, so I mean, finally I said yes, I would do it. And when we were actually shooting it, it was like, I kept saying to Sidney, I said, I'm just not funny. I mean, everybody, because I was surrounded by, really great comedians.
Yeah,
Bill
really
great
and,
comic actors, Bill Murray, and Dustin, and Terry Garr, and I was like the straight one, and I kept Dustin would say, well, why don't you try this? And it would go so far against my grain to do something kind of.
But that's what makes it. I mean, there's something that the still, quiet, vulnerable center that humanizes the whole thing. I mean, I think first of all, comedy is generally underrated, I think. I mean, it's so hard to do, and when it works, which this does, I think, it's just one of those things that clicks all the time. It never gets awards because people don't appreciate just how hard it is to do. And you humanize, I can't imagine the Dustin Hoffman character with somebody else. It's something, your quality there, and that, for instance, when he gets in bed with you, you haven't seen him yet, and he turns and you look at this head full of curls, and you just want to crack up so bad, and you don't, and you just tactfully sort of turn your head away so you won't laugh. I mean, there's so many undercurrents in that scene. It's just marvelous. And there's this, this sort of this intimacy that women have that he's sort of loving, and yet at the same time he has a lech for you. I mean, I think it's just incredibly, incredibly complex. Yeah. Is he difficult though? I mean, is he just such a perfectionist that
he is a real perfectionist. Yeah. He was not, I mean, it was never difficult for me working with him. Mm-hmm. I know I think he probably made Sydney's life miserable while they were shooting, and maybe afterwards too.
Well, Sydney got back at it. That scene between the two of them is one of the funniest things
Yes, it's a great scene. Yeah. But, I mean, we did, for instance, the scene at the end where he reveals that he's not a woman on live television. We shot it for 1 week solid, and then he looked at it.
At his request.
Yeah, and he did not like it, and we reshot it. So it was like, 3 different times we came back to that scene until Dustin was satisfied with getting it right. But Dustin worked in a way that I've never worked with any other actor. And that was, he created this kind of, it was almost like a stage performance in a way. Most film actors you work with have this thing of like being extremely private. Dustin always invited tons of people to the set and would have like people standing around watching them. And
Does that bother you?
Well, I didn't, for a part like this, it didn't.
Yeah.
Had it been a different kind of role, yes. I mean, because I always like to work on a closed set. Yeah. But he would work himself up into almost a frenzy. And he would have the camera rolling, and he'd scream at Sydney, keep it rolling, keep it rolling. And he'd like run around in circles, and he'd come like through the set, and he'd say his line, and then he'd run off, and he'd scream, keep it rolling, and he'd come. And you could see, I mean, it actually works great when you see it all pieced together, but when
you're hyping himself up, was that what he was doing?
Yeah. But when you're witnessing as another actor, you're sitting there thinking, geez, this is...
Well, it's also, it's not exactly team playing either. I mean, it's really, he's doing his bit and let the pieces
But he
in.
made it work, and he made it work beautifully for that character.
Well, it's interesting because, I mean, I remember at the time there was a lot of sort of feminist disagreement. Was this great or wasn't it? I thought it was wonderful, but I thought it was interesting that in the 70s, we finally got a film about how difficult it is to hold down a job and to be divorced, hold down a job, and raise a kid at the same time. And who played the role? Dustin Hoffman, in Kramer versus Kramer.
Right.
And so now we finally get a film about an aging single woman and who plays the role? Dustin Hoffman. So he was sort of the great feminist.
But Dustin had that thing about being a woman. He was absolutely, I mean, his greatest. He used to talk about it. His most profound disappointment in life was the fact that he would never bear a child.
Really?
I mean, he used to go on and on about this, that experience of childbirth, and he would never know it. So I think Dustin in some way was, really fascinated with being a woman.
Yeah, that's what makes it so good, because he really got into it. I mean, there's even that moment where he's just practicing being a woman, and Bill Murray, his actor roommate, comes in and says, I forget what, but it's like, wait a minute, you're really getting into this, aren't you? Yeah. So it plays with that idea. Yeah. I mean, it's what you said earlier about Bob Rafelson. This is the whole thing about acting and directing. You get to be male and female. And that's why Hoffman was so good in Kramer versus Kramer with the kid, probably. Because he really has this, and he's very mothering with you in this. I mean, he really expresses I mean, he's trying to get you on the right track, even though he's trying to
quit drinking and date the right man. And
he's a much better mother than Kim Stanley, for example. Yes. If you had to choose.
You would never choose Kim as your mother. Oh, God.
What was this like making because you were making large and small films during your career. Was Tootsie more like a New York film or a Hollywood film, or did you think of it in those terms?
Well, it felt like a New York film, and it was nice because we went back. I mean, I had been because I was living in New York, and I had been in Los Angeles for almost a year making Frances, and getting ready to do that, and going from Postman to Frances, and when we started shooting, it really was like going home. And Dustin lived there, and Sydney loved to be in New York. So, it had the feel of a New York film. It was nice.
So it wasn't... Well, none of the ones you've done, at least up to this point, except King Kong, I guess, where it was sort of
No.
was counting how much money you were going to. I mean, they weren't making films like that. It was still when Hollywood was. I mean,
It
we
was
didn't think
great. You could
yeah.
make these
Yeah.
films, and nobody was breathing down your. I mean, with
You weren't counting what the first weekend was going to
no,
do. It wasn't Paramount and everybody.
nobody cared about that. Nobody was
Yeah.
tracking
Yeah,
the film
yeah.
before it came out,
And doing test audiences and focus groups. And
focus groups. Filmmaking by committee. I think it's just ruined
and it has. And just
filmmaking.
think, I mean, this looks like a golden period right now.
It
Looking
does.
At it.
It
Yeah.
does when you think of it.
Yeah.
Plus, those films probably. I mean, certainly, Francis could never be made today.
No.
Postman, probably not. Tootsie, maybe, because it had kind of the most commercial overtones. But, you know, I don't know.
Well, you know, I was talking to a woman from WGBH that she's doing a documentary on the 30s and the production code, and she had submitted a script from, I think it was a Kay Gibbons novel, a small woman-oriented script, to Lisa Henson and her company. I mean, Lisa Henson and some other woman. Lisa Henson is Jim Henson's daughter. I forget the name of that company. And she got a phone call because she's a friend of theirs. And so this young male employee called within a week and said, you know, I read your script. I just loved it. It's funny. It's touching. I was moved. I was surprised at myself. But we have a mandate from Columbia Pictures not to do only male action pictures or high concept comedies, no woman-oriented material.
I know.
You know.
I think that mandate has gone around.
And that's it. That is the Hollywood mandate. And that's what
Yeah.
you're just saying. I mean, at least Tootsie is a high concept comedy.
Yeah.
I mean, if it were, you know, things like Birdcage, those things, especially if you've got male
Yes.
stars in it,
Yeah.
then it's a go. But we'll get more into that with when we get to
Yes.
Thousand Acres. All right, let's see what else have we got here. Country. This was really something you nourished, wasn't it? I mean, it's close to your heart and geography.
Well, it was interesting because the way it came about, I mean, I'd always been fascinated with, and usually it was in the context of the Depression, this idea of what happens to a family, what happens to a person when they are forced off their land and they become, well, in the Depression, obviously, migrant, you know. But one day I was actually in New York, and I was in Los Angeles, and I picked up the Los Angeles Times. I was, I don't remember what I was doing out there, but I picked up the Times, and on the front page was a picture of a farm auction. The man, there was a husband and wife and a mother-in-law, and it was at the kind of the height of the auction, and there was the picture was just of these three people and then a crowd of farmers behind. And the picture was so touching because you could see the woman's rage. She was just like, she looked like she was about, like her head was going to explode. And the mother-in-law behind had that same expression on her face. But the man was completely poleaxed. It was like he was not connecting anymore to anything. Like it somehow had, like, it was so painful that it had gone so far beyond his realizations or expectations or you know, beyond his imagination. And the picture struck me that you could do a story now and set it in contemporary times because of the situation with the family farms, especially in the Midwest. So, and here again, this is a film that could no more be made today than Fly to the Moon. I actually, from this picture, just had a concept. Why don't we do a story about a family living on a farm in Iowa, and because of all this, you know, everything that's going on, they're about to lose the farm, and they come and they auction off the farm and all their possessions. And I found a writer. I found this great writer from Texas, Billy Whitliff, and told him the story, and he said yes, he'd like to. He'd really like to write it. And we talked about, well, who would we like to direct it? We said, well, how about Hal Ashby? So we called up Hal Ashby. He said, sure, he'd like to direct it. I mean, it was like so smooth compared to how things usually happen. And we had 2 meetings We went to the newly formed Touchstone division of Disney and to the Ladd Company, and walked into those two places on one afternoon, the three of us, Whitliff, Ashby, and myself, and what they call pitched the story. We told the story. There was no story. It was like this thing, here's this farm family, their farm's being auctioned off. It was a picture. And by the time we got home that afternoon, it was a go film. So Whitliff started writing. We made an extraordinary trip to Iowa, the three of us, and did our research. And within a year, we were shooting it. Ashby dropped out. Whitliff came in. And then we brought in a second director, Richard Pierce, who ended up shooting the film. And it was one of those miraculous things that I really don't think could possibly ever happen again.
Well, one of the interesting things, the very issues that it raises are the same issues that affect film and publishing, which is that farming is not about farming anymore, but about business. It's about big business, and that's exactly what has happened to everything else. Movies are not about movies anymore; they're about bottom lines.
Yeah.
In the scene we're going to see, it's fairly early on when the Sam Shepard character has been called down to the bank, and they've been told by somebody who was his friend, now is gone over to the other side, that they're going to review the loan. The FHA is now recalling loans because there's not enough collateral. They've lost money. It's been lean years. So the wife doesn't know about this yet, so we'll look at that.
You could never even do a scene like that now. It moves way too slow.
Well, the whole thing is very low-key.
Yeah.
In fact, there are no big scenes in it.
And that man, the extra that was standing there that had that dialogue, he'd be cut out in a heartbeat.
That's right. There are no subordinate characters, no.
There's no texture anymore.
That's right, that's right. But it's interesting what you say now. I mean, that's true, that he's already got this kind of numb reaction to this thing. It's like his whole life. And what's interesting is, and this is probably true of this area anyway, that there's very much an equal relationship. In fact, the wife is the bookkeeper in the family, and she's very involved in everything. It's a very much a two-way.
Yeah, when we were doing all that research, I mean, the one thing that was very clear was that it was an absolute partnership.
Yeah, completely.
I mean, she had her duties, he had his, but it was really 50-50.
Yeah. And he does, I mean, he's emasculated by this, as a man would be. He feels like he's let his family down. It's a killer.
Yeah.
But what was it like making it? Was it satisfying, I would think?
Well, you know, it was very interesting to make because we made it in Iowa, and we were right in the heart of where all of that was going on at that time.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because I do think that, not that it called attention to on a kind of a political scale, did it make any difference, you know, a film like this, but on a very personal scale, the response from people was overwhelming.
Yeah.
Of people who were in that same situation and who really responded to somebody trying to tell that story.
Well, it did make a difference, though, didn't it? I mean, didn't the FHA, was there some...
Well, you know, it was interesting because there was a certain amount of press involved with it. I mean, we did go and testify before the... who were those people? Some senators or something. Not that they gave a rat's ass, let me tell you. But we did go and, you know, did this whole thing. But the difference it made was there were a lot of women there, a lot of women from this situation because they had formed a coalition.
So they did something very like what you did in there. Yeah.
And when we testified, it was Sissy Spacek, Jane Fonda, I think that was it, and me. And we testified before this congressional hearing. And, you know, you could tell you were just...
Going right over there, weren't
it didn't make it. No, yeah. I mean, they sat there and they were smug and they were very, you know. But the women that were listening were actually tremendously moved and very thankful that at least somebody spoke for them.
Well, it was a general sort of consciousness raising about it, I think.
Yeah, maybe so.
Yeah. Was it fun working with Sam Shepard? Did you have a good? You have wonderful. You have wonderful.
He looked
scenes.
so handsome there, didn't he?
Both of you. What a couple.
Well, yes. I mean, that was the second time we'd worked
Yeah.
together. We worked together in Francis, which is where I met him, and then.
Is that when you met him? Mm-hmm. Oh, really? You didn't know him before that?
No, no. Actually, I met him. He came in to read, or to talk to the director, and the director asked me to come and just, meet a couple actors that he was thinking of casting in that part in Francis.
And you?
I said, well, cast him.
Yeah.
I wasn't stupid.
There's that wonderful scene where you first meet and he follows you up the hill to your house
Yes.
in Seattle,
Yeah.
and he's kind of teasing you, and you're talking smart. It's just somehow it's an embryo of the relationship.
But then when we got around to doing this film, I mean, it was great. It was great because we were able to work together, and he did some
Something he
rewriting
believed in,
along
too.
the way.
Yeah.
And he was real involved with it. So.
Well, sometimes you have, I can't think of any offhand, but there are plenty of people who are real couples in real life, and the chemistry doesn't translate onto the screen, but yours really does, I think. And I think what it is so often when people are very much at ease with each other, they lose that tension.
Yeah.
But you seem to be able to do both, to have the tension and also the ease, because it's something very easy here. And so, okay. We're probably missing some. I'm sort of directing this to the films that we've got here. The last two are Blue Sky and 1,000 Acres, but there may be things we want to talk about along the way.
Yeah, the film that I did after Country actually is one of my favorite films, and that was Sweet Dreams.
Oh yeah, the Patsy Cline. That was fantastic. And how did that come about? Because I thought.
Well, that was one of those rare occasions where you picked up the morning mail and there was this script and you thought, what the hell is this? And you start going through it and you think, oh my God, this is a great piece of writing. It was written by Robert Getchell, who's a wonderful writer. And it just kind of arrived out of the blue. Carol Rice was directing, and I immediately said yes. I mean, it was one of those parts where I didn't think twice about it.
Yeah, you knew.
That this would be a great part to play. I just loved her spirit and her energy, and it was so much fun because I could actually pretend I was singing.
And know that it was going to come out good
and
since it was her voice.
And know it was going to come out like Patsy Cline, which you can't get much better than that. So. And it was because I've never been able to even carry a tune. I'm so tone deaf. It's just terrible. But I can hear the music perfectly in my head. But I can't sing. I cannot find the tune.
It's a great fantasy too that you can. So
yes.
this must have been.
So this was great. But I remember when we first started doing it, because I worked with this kind of legendary Nashville producer. His name was Owen Bradley, and he was Brenda Lee's producer, and Patsy Cline's, and Loretta Lynn's.
Were you a country music fan?
Not really, but I mean, of course, I'd listened to that music. I was certainly had heard Patsy Cline's music. I didn't know that much about her life or death or whatever, but when I first went in there and I went to the barn, his recording studio was called The Barn, and he had set up all the playback stuff, and I remember the first time I came in there and all the Nashville musicians were there, and I kind of sat down like this. I was all hunched over, and I kind of sang along like this. And by the time we started shooting, I was so into, I would be singing at the top of my lungs. I'd be singing so loud, and I'd have them crank the feedback up so loud that nobody could possibly hear me. But it was so energizing and so liberating. It was really wonderful. I had a great time doing that part.
Well, and you went into the Southern thing so easily. Had you ever lived in the South? Or? No?
No.
Because so often that's
but I always loved those Southern characters. But with Patsy, it was much more kind of country, deep. That Winchester, Virginia, that kind of
West.
Deep, yeah. And I got a chance to work with Ed Harris.
Oh yeah.
It was one of those that's happened to me twice now when I've done films, and this was the first time it happened. I watched the director's cut, and sat there through the whole film and saw Eddie's, one of his last scenes where he's in a bar and he's quite drunk and he's saying to his friend, who's actually played by John Goodman, "You don't know what it's like to rub up against something dangerous." And as I was sitting there watching him play the scene, I thought, that's it. He's stolen the film. I mean, this is really his movie. He's so brilliant in this. And, you know, I mean, as it turned out, I mean, you know, I mean, I got a, you know, good recognition from it. But I mean, it was one of those things that I was so overwhelmed by the other actors' work. I thought it so overshadowed what I had done that it just kind of like rocked me in my chair.
Nobody steals a movie from you. They never have. Oh, that was a great one. No, he is, and he's one of these quiet actors that I think, he's an actor's actor in many ways. He's really appreciated by other actors. Blue Sky is interesting because it was Tony Richardson's last film.
Yeah.
And it had this strange career where it was made, and then I don't even know quite why it was held up. Was it because of the vagaries and idiocies of Hollywood? Or?
Well, it was because, first of all, it was because the studio was collapsing.
No.
And about the time we were finishing the shooting, so by the time the film was finished and ready to be released, the studio had completely collapsed. They had no distribution. They had nothing left anymore. And instead of selling it off, it became collateral in the bankruptcy because all their product had to be held then. So it actually ended up as part of like bankruptcy proceedings for the following 3 years until it was finally released. But even at that time, I mean, Orion really didn't have a distribution arm, so there was, you know, I think it was released in about 20 movies for 10 minutes. And
if it hadn't been for the Academy Award, probably nobody would have ever seen it.
yeah, I still don't know if anybody's seen it except members of the Academy.
Well, we'll look at the clip and then tell us how it originated and so forth. The shot of that stiletto heel on
That was
the
Tony Richardson's favorite shot in the film.
I wondered if that line had any, it sort of has an echo when you come in and you say, "What a dump."
Yeah.
Did you ever see Betty
Yes, of
Davis
course.
in Beyond the Forest? I figured that too.
Well, I figured Carly borrowed from everybody.
Yeah.
You know.
So ahead of that.
Well, it was interesting because I had just finished doing this film called Music Box, where I played kind of first-generation American of Hungarian descent who discovers that her father was actually this horrible, Nazi monster during World War II, and she adores and is devoted to her father, and she defends him on trial and then discovers that he really was guilty of all these things. And at the end of that, you know, it was such a kind of a dark and dour...
And very different from anything else you'd ever done.
Yes, and it was, you know, I had this dark wig, and it was, I don't know, I just felt so down. Yeah, so I thought, boy, I'm going to do something the next time that's really kind of wild and take it out there, and this part came up. I mean, it was in very early stages when I first saw it, of the script, and it had I mean, we were in development with it. My little production company, we were developing it, but the odd thing is, I thought that would be, it was one of my few times that I made like a career choice, where I thought, okay, well, if I do, you know, Music Box and I do Blue Sky, what an interesting combination to do, you know, this after that, and what a good career choice. Of course, you know, then it sat on the shelf for 4 years. So in the meantime, I did like 3 or 4 other films that came out in between it. So enough for my career choices, but it was great working with Tony Richardson. It was really great because he is first and foremost a stage director, so he had a great sense of staging and using the camera just to follow the actors and to really stage the scene, which film, as you know, film actors almost never
bits
do.
and pieces,
They,
yeah.
it's bits and
Yeah.
pieces, and it's like this kind of traditional way of shooting, which is so deadly. You know, the master, the two-shot, the over-the-shoulder, the singles, and you know, it just with Tony, it was great because he staged the scene, and then it was as though the camera were in service to the actors. And he is one of the few directors, and I can name them, and I will gladly name them. Carol Rice, who directed Sweet Dreams, Costa Gavras, who directed Music Box, and Tony Richardson, who directed Blue Skies, are the only directors that I've worked with that do not sit in front of the monitor glued to this little box to watch the image, who actually were present, like behind the camera, and watching the actors with their own eye. It was really great.
So they're with you, kind of.
They're with you, and you know, it's almost as though, because doing film is so isolating anyhow, and what you end up doing is establishing the relationship with the camera, basically. I mean, even though you're playing the scene with the other actor, but your main audience, you know, is this camera. But when you have a director who's absolutely present and there next to the camera and watching the actors, it's this kind of, I mean, it actually does. It like propels you on somehow. You want to do more, you want to do better, you want to somehow satisfy.
Well, you certainly get that in that scene. It's a real crescendo. It really builds, following you around. And you just need to see the daughters once to know what a horror this is for them.
Yeah, really, just how you don't want your mom to behave when you move. It's hard enough moving to a new town. Oh, God. Mom, come on.
Well, are they film? I mean... well, yeah. Are the films, which as harrowing as the character may be, are somehow... give you something back, as opposed to ones that are more draining? What makes the difference there?
Well, this one, I mean, Tony was so...
Because he was so with you that
he was so, and he shot so fast. Tony never had a moment of indecision. It was really his film.
And he knew what was going on. That's why he didn't have to look in the viewfinder.
Exactly, and he absolutely moved. I mean, we moved fast, and so it kind of gave you this sense of freedom, and you never exhausted yourself working, which happens a lot on film.
It's not so much the role as the tension that you feel because of the way it's directed or the way of the...
Yeah, because of the, I mean, you know, I did Streetcar on stage in 2 different productions, one in New York, one in London, 2 completely different and separate productions, different directors. One was just exhausting to the point that I thought I couldn't make it. And the other one was so exhilarating. It's the same part, the same amount of time on stage, you know, obviously different production. And that's
Do you want to say which is which?
Well, yes, I will. I've never... The London production was so thrilling.
Really?
And I worked with a great director, Sir Peter Hall, and it was such a collaboration. And the production really soared. Yeah. So it actually carried you along rather than you felt like, you know, in the New York production, I felt like every night you were coming on with, like, you know, this weight on your back. I mean, the great thing about that actually was the play, though. I mean, the play, even no matter how bad the production is, the play is rock solid under you. You can't go too far wrong. But with Tony, you know, this particular scene, he had on, and it's funny because when I read a script, there's always one scene, 1 or 2 scenes, big scenes like this, where you think, oh, God, I got to work up to that, you know, I don't even know. And it's kind of this thing, if you look forward to it, you have a certain sense of apprehension and dread about doing one of these kind of scenes. And I looked at the shooting schedule, the first day of shooting, and I saw the second day of shooting, this scene was scheduled. And I went to Tony and I said, my God, we can't shoot that the second day. I said, I don't know who this character is. I don't know what we're doing yet. I don't have any. And he said, that's why we're going to do it.
Just plunge in.
Yeah, just jump in.
Before you got any preconceptions.
Yeah.
And that's what you did.
Yeah. But he was a really wonderful.
Did he have a lot to do with
Man.
the way you look in that? I mean, that sort of 50s look that is so great.
Well, no, he really let me kind
Did he?
of.
Did you develop that?
And
Do you have a lot to do with how you look?
I hate to admit it, but yes,
Yeah.
most of the time I've made some bad
Well,
choices.
sometimes
but
you've been sort of anti-glamour. You've deliberately
Yeah.
downplayed.
Yeah.
And
But with this, I wanted to do a woman who was, I mean, she really is kind of like this child. You know, she's such a childlike creature. And I wanted her to have these personas. And so I chose like 3 of the biggest movie stars
I wondered,
of that
yeah,
period,
yeah.
starting with Brigitte Bardot, which was kind of her island, exotic,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
Mediterranean look.
Yeah.
And then moving back stateside, I thought, well, she'd definitely go Monroe. And when she had like worn that,
Yeah.
worn that look there, then she would move on to Liz Taylor.
Well, it's so interesting because it's really what
It was fun.
It's what women in the 50s did more than any other decade. It was the last period of really big movie stars, big glamour movie stars that women had. After
Yeah.
that all sort of the star mystique
Right,
sort
had
of
disappeared.
unraveled. Yeah.
But it was fun to do that. It was fun because just the kind of disguises that the character took on.
And so it was almost something distant from you, so that you almost could. I mean, you had a certain disengagement.
Yeah.
From that.
Yeah.
Which is true of that character because there's a pathology there that is
Yes.
not a together person. in
No,
some way.
she's not. I always thought of her as being kind of emotionally backward.
Yeah.
You know,
arrested somehow.
Yes,
Yeah.
arrested development
Yeah.
somewhere along the line.
And the children are so mature. I mean,
Yeah.
they have to be. They become
Yeah,
the
they become the
parents.
parents.
Yeah. Oh.
But I mean, for me, the greatest thing in that film was what Tommy Lee did. And I think that's another case, I mean, like with Ed Harris, where the actor, because it's perceived more as a woman's film,
Yeah.
a story about a woman, the actor doesn't get the credit he
credit.
deserves. And Tommy Lee was so note perfect in that movie. I mean, to the extent that with a lesser actor, I don't think my performance would have carried.
That's right. Well, first, he is so forgiving, for one thing, so he makes you acceptable. I think this
Right.
is always a crucial thing. I mean, if you don't have that, then the character's flying loose with no sympathy at all,
Right.
so that he kind of anchors you.
And because he is such a man.
Oh, so virile. and
Yeah, there was
sexy.
no moment where you thought, you know, there was never any danger of him being perceived as kind of a wimpish,
not at all.
weak. It
no.
was just, you could really understand, I think, that here was a man who, as a military scientist, had this very kind of linear, intellectual, rational existence that had him kind of boxed in. And the only
freedom.
his only outlet was the
And he's
wildness
attracted
of
to
this
that.
woman.
Yeah, he in some sense, he's complicitous in a way.
Yes, he's
but-
very
yeah,
complicitous.
Yeah,
Very
yeah.
complicitous. I mean, you can see that all the bad stuff she does.
He just
Yeah, he
gets
likes
off
it
on
up
it,
until
yeah.
up until
it-
that one moment
yeah.
where he says she's taken it too far this time, but it wasn't far enough because he took her back one more time.
One more, that's right.
But that was actually based on a real story.
Oh, really?
The woman who originally wrote the story wrote it about her mother and father.
Oh, really?
And they actually married and divorced 7 times. See, but now if we'd done that in the film, nobody would have believed it.
You can't. you can't do that. There's certain things you just can't do. I remember when Truffaut was making Jules and Jim. In the book, Catherine had many more lovers than she did, and he knew that he would lose the audience.
lose the
completely.
audience.
Yeah, you have to. All right. We get up to 1,000 Acres, which I think is a terrific film, which has gotten brutalized by the press, and I'm not sure why. And I think it's, in fact, there's no one. I think they're floundering. There's something in that film that has really disturbed people, and we'll talk about that a little bit. We're going to show 2 scenes from that. One is when Jessica Lange, of course, plays. It's from the Jane Smiley book. It's the sort of feminist reworking of King Lear, and it takes place in Iowa. Jason Robards' is tyrannical father who's divided up his farm among his 3 daughters. And Jessica Lange and Michelle Pfeiffer are the two older daughters, and Michelle Pfeiffer is always this completely a furious person because she remembers the abuse by the father, and she's and her whole life has been a kind of rage, and she's also at this point got cancer. And Jessica Lange is the cheerful, happy one that sort of keeps everybody together and is the optimist. And she's overheard her father and the youngest daughter, Jennifer Jason Leigh, in a scene which is a reckoning, is a realization that he did abuse her, Jessica Lange. And so we're going to show that clip. I think that when you actually become the father in that scene, I mean, you sound like you actually have his voice and suddenly reliving that. And then you have this transformation, which, I mean, to me, there's something so fascinating about this whole idea, and you have it in Washington Square when a woman discovers that the man whom she's adored and idealized all of her life is not only a bastard, but is completely betrayed, has violated her very being. And then suddenly she becomes another person. Her whole persona crumbles, and she becomes something else. And I think it's an extraordinarily powerful film, and I think this scene also, we'll just go right into the last scene, not the last scene of the film, but our last clip from that a little bit later. She's left, at this point, she's left home. She's given up her share of the property. She's working as a waitress in a hash house along the road, and Keith Carradine, as her husband, finds her there. I don't think the general public knows about this, but the critics, the Jocelyn Morehouse, the director, wanted to take her name off the cuts, and reportedly Michelle Pfeiffer vetoed that and said she wouldn't appear in an Alan Smithy film. That's the name of when directors take their names off film. Alan Smithy is the pseudonymous non-person. What happened?
What actually happened?
Yeah.
What actually happened, and I mean, there's no reason to, I mean, we've had a kind of a party line, and you know, I mean, everybody's tried to finesse this. What actually happened was Jocelyn Morehouse turned in her director's cut, which was a disaster. I mean, a complete disaster, incomprehensible from an emotional level, from a storytelling, everything. And the studio, who was distributing it, said, "You've got to fix this. You have to make some changes." And the next thing we knew, she quit. So here we were with this film in not very good shape and no director any longer. So it was then left to the editors and the producers to try to piece together what footage she had left us with. And considering the turmoil, considering the mess that she left us in, I mean, the fact that we got the film out at all, I thought was quite astonishing.
I think it's so interesting that the critics have automatically sided with her without knowing anything about the story whatsoever, just because she's the director and Disney is the big bad studio. Jocelyn Morehouse did, as you probably know, is an Australian director who did a wonderful small film called Proof. Then she instead of sort of working her way along, she did How to Make an American Quilt, which was okay, but then suddenly she gets this huge project. So.
And I think, you know, in some way, she was so far over her head in it, and the easiest out for her was to say, "This is my cut. If you want changes, I
wash my hands.
I wash my hands of this." You know, it was a very high road to take, and what it did actually was kind of remove her from being culpable of anything, because then she could say, "Look what they did to my film."
Nobody was ever going to know what it looked like when she got
exactly.
to it. Yeah.
So it was a very, I think, on her part, probably a very smart move. I think it was very devious and very underhanded and very unfair, especially to her actors who had been down this road with her, who had worked on this for, you know, months and months, and to leave us in the hands of you know, without a director, without anyone at the helm. You know.
Well, it's remarkable, and I think your scenes with Michelle Pfeiffer are just.
I like the scenes with Michelle very much. I mean, there was something wonderfully organic about working with her. I felt, looking at the film, I can see what's, what we needed and what we didn't have and things like that. But the one thing that I think really worked was the relationship. I mean, I really felt that there was something going on there that was absolutely true.
Well, it reminds me a little bit, there was a film last year, Marvin's Room, with Diane Keaton and Meryl Streep, which was the same kind of two great actresses' performances, which, these films, first of all, they have a hard enough time competing in this marketplace anyway, and they need every bit of help they can get. And critics are just so sort of enthralled to these violent, I mean,
I know it.
They pretend to be above it all, and yet somehow they're part of the game.
No, because I mean, we could have actually used for a film like this, you would have needed the support of the critics.
Yeah.
You would have needed critics saying, and there were a handful of them.
Oh, yeah, they were.
Who would have said, if for nothing else, go see the film for these performances, go see. But I mean, some of them were so off the wall. I mean, that never even mentioned the performances in the reviews.
What makes me suspicious is that none of them settled on one single thing. A few would say it was choppy because they heard that she didn't do the final cut. But they would say, well...
They should have seen her cut.
Yeah. They said, we don't want... They were sort of like the Keith Carradine. People shouldn't talk about these things.
Yes, I know.
They didn't. They said, oh, we've heard that before. Well, they haven't. They haven't been very... They've been a lot in the news about repressed memories and recovered memories, but very few films about this subject. It's just difficult. Well, I urge everyone to see it, and it's not too late. And just pay no attention to those critics who have lambasted it. And now we've got time for a few questions. I can't see. So they're going to bring up the house lights a little bit. And I'll repeat the question, and then Jessica will answer. Is someone going to...
Or if nobody has questions, we can all go home.
We don't have a mic. Here, right over here. Who have you not worked with that you would like to work with? Either director, actor, or actress?
Oh, well, I mean, the first one that pops in my mind would be Pacino. I'd love to do something with Al. I mean, there are a lot of directors that I'd like to work with that I haven't had a chance to. I mean,
Scorsese?
Well, I've worked with Scorsese.
Oh, that's right,
yeah. I mean, I'd love to work with him again. But, I mean... There are a lot of English actors that I'd like to get a chance to work with. I mean, I did some work over there this winter, and this past summer I did a film called Cousin Bet that actually is going to be screened at some point, and that was mostly with English actors. And I must say, it was really a great experience. So there are a lot of them.
There was someone right behind you. Yes. Yes, you. It's such a pleasure having you here tonight, and I wonder what it's like to watch yourself on film.
Well, it's interesting seeing these things because I haven't seen them probably since I did them, and I feel very removed from them. The great thing about acting for me is that I get to be somebody else. So when I see the performance, it's almost as though I'm watching somebody else. I don't,
so you can actually enjoy it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know if enjoy it, but I feel a certain distance from it.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel familiar. Now, if I were to watch this interview that he's taping, I would end up like, I don't think I'd ever be able to do it because it's, watching myself. But watching a character it feels so separate and removed.
Well, that's the whole point of acting. That's
yes,
why you don't want to do these things. Yes. Okay. Yes? As you look back on the roles you've played and the films you've chosen, is there a common thread, something that drew you to these?
I guess they're all women who are to some degree, in big emotional swings. Whether it's on the verge of madness or a nervous collapse or, kind of extreme emotional conditions closing in on them. I guess that's really what the thing that attracts me to a part is what emotional area I'm going to be able to investigate. So, you know, I guess.
Is that related to your own life?
Emotional? No, I like characters about as far away from me as I can play them. That's for me what makes acting interesting, is the kind of the disguise and going into areas that you would never want to go into in your own life. I mean, like in Blue Sky. I mean, I would never want to be that kind of mother in front of my children, but it's fun to do that. If you don't have to suffer the repercussions, you know, if you don't have to wake up the next morning and say, oh, I did that again.
Well, maybe it exercises this little part of you that might do that in real life. So this
Well,
way
actually, my daughter once said to me, Mom, do you think playing all these crazy people are going to make you crazy? Which I thought was very astute. I said, no, I actually think it probably keeps me from going crazy. So.
Yeah. Well, you do play a lot of women who make bad choices, but you don't seem to have made terribly bad choices in your life.
No,
so.
I feel very lucky.
All right, let's see. One more question, I guess.
Is a sense of place very important to you? You've done 2 films with Iowa settings. Would you ever think of coming back to Minnesota? Another son of far north?
I'd love to do something here again. Yeah, I would.
All right, one last question. The woman, was there a woman? Yes. Yes, you. She loved Crimes of the Heart, too, so say a brief something about that.
Well, that was a joy to do, because working with Diane Keaton and Sissy Spacek and Tess Harper and Sam was in it, and we had a wonderful kind of familial set and situation. Everybody brought their kids every day. It was very relaxed, and I made great friendships with Diane and Sissy and Tess. So, you know, it was one of those films that I look back on and I feel great fondness for. It was fun to do.
Are you able to keep these friendships? Are they just, that's one of the casualties of movie making?
Well, no, I mean, I feel like I've kept the friendships. I mean, certain people that I've worked with, like Amy Madigan or Sissy or Diane, or, you know, even now with Michelle. The only problem is that your careers are, you're always someplace else. I don't live, you know, I mean, I live in Minnesota, you know, so
I mean, come through too often.
I don't see, you know, a lot of
they're there. They're somewhere inside you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you, Molly.
I know everybody